What's up? This is Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Varandas. If you aren't sick of hearing my voice after the last 2.5 hour podcast with Robbie Martin, then I'm glad you tuned in because it's another long podcast, but another awesome one. And the last one with Robbie Martin was flowing, and we hit on so many topics, and this one's very similar. And I want to give Enter Shikari kind of a proper introduction because we kind of jumped right into the conversation, and I don't feel like I really explained their music or what their sound much at all, even though there really isn't anything to compare them to, because they're a combination of hardcore, punk, metalcore with dubstep, electronica, industrial, trance, and it's just a mixture of all these genres. And even if I was asked to find a band they were the most similar to, I'm not sure I could find one. So I think that if you want to check them out, unfortunately, YouTube's a little cunty with putting music online, so with copyrighted music, and I have a feeling they'll kick me off or kick off my YouTube video if I end up putting their song on. So I may or may not be playing them in the background, but don't tell YouTube. But in our show description, I always put easy links to find all the guests' work and just easy way to kind of get a hold of their stuff. And if you're a fan of theirs, or if you become a fan of theirs after the show, then you can just easily find them. Like I always tell you guys, I do a video episode of every guest that is willing to do a Skype conversation, because there are some guests that sometimes we're just like, oh, well, I just want to do audio, which is cool with me. That's fine. Sometimes I just think that it's more comfortable maybe just doing audio, and you don't feel like you have to stare at a camera or anything like that. So I can see that perspective. But in this case, Rou did a video episode with me, so you can, if you're listening to this on your phone or whatever, then definitely check out our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, where you can see the split screen conversation between me and Rou, and you can kind of put faces to the voices and the opinions and stuff. So I know sometimes that's something that people like to do, is just kind of put a face to the voice. So check that out, and also support their music. Like I said, I'll put links to his stuff, so support his music. It's a lot about social issues and political. I hate to use the word political, and I know he doesn't like it too, but I don't know what other way of really explaining it. I guess social issues. We'll just keep it as social issues, but it's a lot of social issues that he hits on, and global issues, and just issues in general. I think that he hits on a lot of important topics that I'm glad that he's sparking these conversations, and there's not a lot of artists doing it. So I'm glad that there is bands like Enter Shikari, because those days of Rage Against the Machine and 1 Minute Silence are kind of behind us. When those, at one time Rage Against the Machine was one of the biggest bands topping the charts, and they had a lot of obviously political and then social, I guess, metaphors and issues that they spoke about. So it's important to continue to have artists like this and continue to support them. So check their music out, and also if you guys want to support the podcast, obviously Theory 6 is my music project, and it's a great way of supporting the show. You get a song instead of just donating money. You can get a song, and you get to support the show too. And I'll have to admit that the music sales have not been great, but hopefully as the show grows and it becomes more popular and people support the show, or they want to find ways to support the show, hopefully buying a song is a great way of doing it. So also I have a new song that's coming out. I'll put at the end of this podcast, called War for Peace. It's on YouTube. There's a little video that I made for YouTube, and hopefully very soon it'll be on Google Play and iTunes and all the places you can find music, Shazam, and all that stuff. So also, if you listen to this on your phone, or if you don't listen to this on your phone actually, then make sure to go to your app store, download any podcast app. Stitcher is one that works for all the phones. Another good one is Podcast Addict. Has a great look and feel and user friendly if you have Android cell phone. So check that out, and just make it easy to get your podcast instead of watching on YouTube or listening on your computer. It's just an easy way of getting podcasts, and you can download it when you have Wi-Fi. That way you don't use up any of your network. Then you can listen to it whenever. So do that. And before I talk too much like usual, then I'll jump right into this podcast. So enjoy the podcast, and thanks so much from the bottom of my heart for all the support and everybody who takes time out of their day to listen to this podcast. It's a lot of work, but I think after it's all said and done, it's worth it. But enough fucking around. Enjoy the show, guys. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Believe in the ripple effect.
What's up, everybody? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Today we got an awesome show. I'm super excited, and I can't thank Ben McLeish enough to hook me up with an artist that I'm a huge fan of, Rou Reynolds from Enter Shikari. If you don't know who they are, check them out. If you listen to the show, I probably have talked about them a billion times. Anytime we talk about, any type of music with a meaning or whatever, your name always gets brought up. And actually a lot of UK artists, because it seems like, I don't know if it's because of the history of the UK or in Ireland and all, like, just because of the history, and people are just more aware of the history. But for some reason, it seems like all the best bands I have, and I know I'm not going to use political bands, all the best bands that have something to say, they all seem like they come from the UK, from like Low Key. I'm a huge Low Key fan, and unfortunately, he's on a hiatus, and I haven't heard anything from it for a while. But if you haven't heard of him, definitely check him out. Akela, who we talked about before we went on the air, the Architects, their last album was fucking brutal. It was so good. And then there's not, and even like, are you aware of like 1 Minute Silence they were from Ireland? They were kind of
the name rings a bell.
Yeah, they're kind of like Rage Against the Machine. Like when a lot of people was listening to Rage Against the Machine, just because I heard about this band from Ireland that wasn't Rage Against the Machine, I felt special. I'm like, no, I'm not a Rage guy. I'm a 1 Minute Silence guy. But they're the same thing. Like, another band from Ireland. And I heard you talk about this on an interview about how when you were growing up, even with Rage, you weren't sure that you were getting the message. You were just kind of digging the music. I was the same way. When I heard you say that, I'm like, dude, I was a huge 1 Minute Silence fan for the longest time, never realizing that like their lyrics were all, about social issues and political issues and all the history of Ireland and stuff like that. And then as I got older, I almost appreciated the music more and liked it even more when I found out, like, holy shit, these guys aren't just great musicians and talented, but they have a meaning and they have something to say and they're passionate. And I think that, to me, it's like music should be about something that is passionate and something that moves you. And I don't see how any musician could go on stage and play music that didn't move them or feel them. Like, when you get like a Vanilla Ice or even, more recent, a Rihanna or whatever, who doesn't write their own music and all that stuff, like, to me, that just seems weird. Wouldn't you find it hard you ever think about that? Like how hard it would be to play music that you didn't write or you weren't really in the process or you didn't move you in some aspect?
I cannot even think about how that would work. Like, it's so far outside of my world, of my sort of consciousness. It's weird because I think the audience could tell straight away. I think they like you were just saying, like, for me personally, Rage Against the Machine, listening to them, even though I wasn't conscious of what the specifics of what they were talking about, I could tell just that there was a fire in the music. There was heart, and there was very passionate meaning behind the lyrics. And I think anyone can tell really when someone's just, especially in pop music, because it's so obvious, it's so overtly just insipid, and just the lyrics are so vague and flat and soulless. And I think you don't have to be 10 years old, and you can still kind of have an inkling as to what music is passionate and honest and real, and what music is just, I don't want to say what these pop stars are doing, but they're probably just in it for the money, is the old cliche.
Or sometimes I think that maybe they might not be in it for the money initially. It's kind of like a politician. They might start off with good what's the word I'm looking for? Just good intentions, and then eventually the money shows up, and then they pick money over morals or money over self-respect, and I think that I think the thing we never look at is like the big picture. Like, what's your legacy? What are you going to leave behind? Like, this podcast is called the Ripple Effect Podcast, and that it's more than just a idea, but to me it's something I truly believe in. I truly believe in, like, for in your circumstance, you're a musician, that you do start your own ripple with your music. Like, I was a Zeitgeist fan before before I realized that you guys were influenced by that. But there's a lot of people, I'm sure, that have never heard of the Zeitgeist movement, who were exposed to it because of you guys. And every single person who listens to the show who believes they can't make a difference, like, you truly can. Even if it's as simple as sparking a conversation, just making somebody aware of a podcast that's thought-provoking, or author or book or documentary that's thought-provoking, and that does become a ripple. And I think that, in your circumstance, when I see musicians that aren't just using this beautiful thing called music to just move people and put energy, but actually like share good, great, inspiring ideas and thought provoke. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing, I think. And you go into that on your Z-Day, when you had that Z-Day talk, and it was really interesting because the power of music, you can, it's almost like I say the same thing about comedy too. Any type of art, and of like comedy, some people might think, oh, that's not art, but I think it is art. And a lot of Bill Hicks and a lot of these comedians, they were philosophers in some sense. They're saying things that they're provoking thought, but they're making you laugh. And the same way that a comedian, by making you laugh, can get you to pay attention to his philosophy, a musician, by putting a melody and music to it, can get you to pay attention to something you might not have paid attention to. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And was that a conscious decision to be, I guess, have these bigger issues in your music? Was that something, because I know you grew up listening to punk, and you can hear it in your music, like the post-hardcore, the punk, and was that something, what came first, kind of like, was it the music, or did you was it conscious decision to put the kind of the themes in the music, or was it just something that just happened because you're motivated?
Yeah, we just kind of drifted into that. I mean, we absorbed a lot of sort of socially conscious music within our local scene. We were really lucky to have a thriving local scene, like punk, hardcore, metal, ska. And a lot of it was, I mean, I have sort of vague flickers of flashbacks and memories of going to our local venue and seeing bands that would pause to make the occasional speech about some sort of issue, even like local issue, because we had a lot of trouble with our local council that were trying to shut down the youth clubs and the various venues that we had in the sort of local live circuit. So I think not only the specific bands that came through, and we sort of, just hearing the speeches and just thinking, again, even if I didn't understand everything, because I was, at this point I started going to gigs when I was like 13, 14, just the fact that they were standing up to, there was being the voice of the voiceless, they were standing up to oppression and various sort of local hierarchies and all sorts of other sort of wider global issues. That just struck me as it just felt like what they were doing was just not only cool, but like, it just felt like it had meaning. It felt like it had a place. It justified its place in the world, So that was really inspiring. And also because of all the local struggles we had with the various local bureaucracy trying to shut us down, I think that immediately gave us a disrespect to authority, even though it was on that very small micro scale. It's you only have to just look at the global scale, the macro scale, and things aren't too dissimilar from those just small hierarchies of a local scale. So that was definitely influential. But it was interesting how you said about comedians being philosophers and or speaking about things that are of worth. Because it's like back in the day, you could sort of just philosophize and people would find it interesting, and you could sort of gain fame or notoriety just out of that. But it seems to be like nowadays you have to sort of have it to the backdrop of music, or you have to make a funny joke about something to make a point, because no one's going to sit down and read some sort of thesis on the consciousness or things like that, So that's really interesting. So I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that I think I feel filled with in terms of music, because there is so much vapid, meaningless music out there. I feel that we have these instruments, these tools to put forward all sorts of ideas that perhaps people wouldn't be exposed to in other walks of life.
Yeah, that's interesting what you said, because there's I had a guest on once. He did this movie Owned and Operated. It's a really good documentary that he put on YouTube for free and spent all this time and effort putting out this documentary for free. And he had this little shot of Craig Ferguson talking about how when, back in the day, people used to look up to older people because they're wise and they're, like you said, they had philosophies that you never thought of and had all this wisdom. And he's like, today it's like culture has changed that, where like everybody celebrates the young, dumb person who just wants to party and drink. And it just like, that probably is a part of it. Like, I wonder how much of it is just we're overstimulated. Like, I feel like we just constantly are distracted by phones, by this, by that. I even have, as much as I love documentaries, and a lot of my influences have come from music and documentaries, because I just don't have I guess I'm not much of a reader as much as I want to say, oh, I've read this book. I have to just come to the conclusion I'm not a reader. Every time I try to start to read a book, I just never get around to reading the whole book.
It's the distractions, man. I'm the same. I have to literally just lock myself in my bedroom, no laptop, no phone. And I've had some days where I've read like a whole book in like a day or something, and then other days where I can't get through one paragraph because I've just got all these distractions.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I got and
difficult.
Oh, absolutely. And I wonder how much of that like has to do with the fact that like nobody will listen to somebody just speak, and talk and even like the TED Talks and stuff like that. I mean, they're kind of short, but even those things, I know a lot of people who I recommend, oh, you should check out this TED Talk, or you should do this or whatever. And people are just, they just brush it off, and it's just like, no, I want to listen to music. But like, even I'm sure when you were growing up, because I'm guessing you're probably around the same age I am, and I'm 29, but it's one of those things where I remember growing up locking myself in my room, and I was excited when I got a new album. I'd open a CD. I was like, I wanted to see the artwork. I wanted to see who the band thanked, because I wanted to see if they were cool with any of the other bands I listened to. And that whole process was an exciting process. It was and like today, it's just like everybody, like most people are casual music listeners. They listen to Pandora, and they're just like, oh, what album have you bought recently? You listen to any cool new bands? No, I just listen to Pandora, or I listen to iHeartRadio or whatever. And I'm like, really? It's like, even though people are considering themselves music fans, like to me, it's hard to consider somebody a music fan when they just listen. Like basically, it's almost background noise, and even with you, obviously putting out albums publicly and all over the world, do you see a lot more single sales than you'd see album sales, or do you see it declining where like people are buying more just a single, or is this genre of music, which is weird to call this genre of music because you're not any genre of music. I mean, for people who don't know who Enter Shikari is, definitely check them out. If you're a fan of trance, dubstep, any type of electronic music, industrial, and then punk, metalcore, like it's just, they mash it all together. And the cool thing I love about you guys is that it's like every song is an adventure that you don't know what's coming next, because it's like a lot of songs, okay, verse, chorus, this, breakdown, it's like all of a sudden you guys will just go, you don't know, you'll speed up, you'll slow down, you do, you'll throw a breakdown somewhere where you wouldn't expect it coming. So I think that's every song, it makes it almost fun to listen to. Another band that's like that is like We Butter Our Bread with Butter, from Germany. They're another band that's just like, they're fucking so unpredictable. It's like every song, it's like you don't know what they're gonna do. They have one part that's like catchy and another part that's like heavy. So it's cool to listen to bands that don't put boundaries on their art form, because I think anytime and I've heard you talk about this, about genres, because I do feel like when you start putting boundaries on your art, then you restrict yourself from like doing something that benefits a song, and you're doing something that just benefits that fan base of, oh, I'm a metalhead, or I'm a punk guy, or I'm whatever, so was there a question in there? There might have been.
There's loads of things I was gonna say. I guess it kind of links to like what you're saying about, because basically, I guess it comes down to like attention span, in terms of the whole like people not either being sort of as interested in music or specific genres, and I guess with our genre, because your expectations are constantly perhaps given a little jolt because there's so much stuff thrown in. I think it keeps people sort of to some extent clinging to it, it's interesting as well, like, reading and documentaries and being able to have the sort of the willpower to sort of concentrate on something. I think it's another sort of fault of modern society, I think, because you have also everything you do, gives you sort of rewards, like even on a sort of neurological level, you're given dopamine as the reward, that's biochemical, that keeps you wanting more of something. And for instance, it's like Twitter or various other social media, like you're given constant little nuggets of information, and it keeps feeding the dopamine, and you could just sit on Twitter for hours instead of watching a documentary, and it's just like, it's so easy to do that, and people want the easy hits of dopamine, just the little things that doesn't take much effort, but it gives you a fair reward. Whereas, you know, reading a book, sitting down, listening to perhaps a very challenging piece of music or a challenging documentary or something like that is a lot. So, you know, it's a lot more work, and that's something that isn't, it's almost not celebrated at all in sort of modern society and culture. But yeah, I guess with our music, it's not really, it's never been a conscious decision to sort of create this weird amalgamation of all sorts of genres and influences. I think it's just, we're quite lucky, to be honest, because we lived on a sort of suburb of London. We had all these venues on our doorstep. You know, within 20 minutes on the train, we could be at all of the best London venues and the small and underground, you know, punk venues as well. So we had a huge, diverse range of music sort of fed into us from a young age as well. Like my dad actually used to be sort of like a part-time DJ back in his heyday, and he used to DJ like Motown and Northern Soul. So that gave me a sort of real love for melody. So even though I was brought up in a hardcore punk scene, I don't think I could ever sort of drop melody and harmony that's sort of inbuilt within me, and with all of us really. So yeah, I think we just, because we're so fidgety, we like to include all these different types of music, and with every album we just get a little bit more confidence to just include something else and keep pushing ourselves forward, I guess.
I think that was the interesting thing about punk music, is that I think that punk, they weren't the best musicians, but they were more about the emotion and the passion than they were trying to be technical. You know, like I grew up listening to like Maiden, but I also listened to, you know, some bands like Amen or Pitch Shifter and bands that were more punk influenced. And it was always like, the one thing I liked about punk, it was always more about the message and about, you know, just they were upset about something and they're passionate, and they didn't care so much about being technical. Where a lot of times metal, I mean, as much as I love Maiden, they didn't have the best lyrics. I mean, a lot of them were like, it was hard to understand what the fuck they were talking about. You know, it's like Run to the Hills. Like, what do you know, I'm like 13. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, so it definitely, that's one thing I think a lot of like young, angry kids kind of related to. And that's why the punk scene was so important, because it influenced, even if the punk scene obviously isn't as popular as it was at one time. I think that it was still such an important time, because I think it did influence people to stand up, you know, and you know, the Anarchy I remember just drawing that on my homework and stuff like that, and then just, you know, just it was just, I thought it made kids aware at a younger age. So that was interesting. And the other thing you said about simple music, I have a theory that I think that like as creatures, like we're always trying to find an easier way to do things. We're always like trying to advance technology so we can get emails quicker, so we can get get to a place quicker and all this stuff. And I think music is no different. I think sometimes like people like simple because it's just easier to consume, and now, like you said, like we're so used to getting these like quick little rewards that anything that is a little bit harder to digest or a little bit more intricate sometimes turns people off, you know. And do you think there's any truth to that?
Yeah, I think like I presume you think this as well, but like it's mostly down to culture, because the mainstream music is so full of very simple, you know, the structure of a pop song: verse, chorus, another chorus, maybe a bridge if you're lucky, you know, like it is extremely simple. Frustratingly, radio, you know, the big wigs at radio seem to think that that's what people want, or at least that if you put music out throughout the daytime that is that sort of relatively easy to digest structure, then you're gonna offend the least amount of people. Like there's a good chance that the most amount of people will at least bear the song, if not like it. And yeah, it's annoying. I think it's just because music is literally you like and you become interested in what you're exposed to a certain extent. Like, I mean, our musical understanding is formed in the womb. Like, you know, we can hear things that, you know, there's often lots of tips about fathers singing to the child and mothers as well. And I guess our expectations of music are sort of amended and progressed every time we listen to music throughout our lives. So that's why, like, Indian or Pakistani music, when we listen to it for the first time, it sounds a bit strange. Second time, third time, if you keep listening to it, it will become just as normal as like Western music. And so that's the sort of frustrating thing about radio. It keeps feeding people shit. It's just, take this shit. And people just kind of force fed it. They gobble it up and they think that's what they like. But there's such a beautiful, huge spectrum of incredible music, like from neoclassical to doom metal. There's all these emotions and different soundscapes that we can create with these tools that we're blessed with. So it's just so sad when music is so limited by the various outlets.
Yeah, it's funny because I read a theory, or I either read it or heard it. Chances are I didn't read it. I probably heard it. But it was the idea, and it's similar to what you said, the idea that, because some people believe that we, like what I said, like we consume, that music's easier to digest, and because of it, that's why people like it. But this one guy, I remember he had this theory that if you keep feeding people, and he was saying that record companies know this, that if you keep feeding people the same songs and they keep hearing it, they will confuse something that is familiar to something with something that they like. And so it's like, even if they don't like it initially, if you keep playing it, eventually you're like, oh shit, I think I like this, but it's really your brain just saying, I know this, and that's kind of an interesting theory, because I do wonder sometimes. I'm like, well, even though this is simple, it sucks so bad. Why are people consuming this, and why do people like this? But once I heard that theory, it kind of made sense. It's like, well, if you play it enough times, even something you might not be a fan of, just because you're familiar with it, you're like, okay, I can move to it, So I wonder if it is like a conscious decision to like feed people shit, and it also sex. I mean, sex is in everything. Like it just, like most, pop artists, they make a lot of money on just like basically being as sexual as possible, and from like Beyonce to Rihanna to whatever. And it's just like, to me, it's I don't know, man. I don't get it. To me, it's music's an art, and then once it becomes just about, and don't get me wrong, like you like electronic music, and I do too. So I think there's music for different reasons. Like I've always liked electronic music because I remember growing up, going to clubs and stuff like that, and just like the music would kind of just take you away. You get a little buzz on a drink, and next thing you know, you're hearing the song, and you're like taken away. And I enjoyed that, and then I enjoyed metal and punk because it had some more meaningful words. So I get the idea of like wanting to dance to it, but I can't figure out why, like especially today with so much like music at your fingertips, because you can go online and Google anything and find artists, and I just can't see why other genres of music haven't broke through. But the cool thing about like the wave of like metal and rock is that every once in a while, like you do get this genre of, like we talked about Christian metal before we went on the air, and it was just like Christian metal did help expose a lot of people to a lot of, to metal again. Like, metal became cool again, the metalcore scene, and like the Devil Wears Pradas and the Jamie's Elsewheres and the Under Oaths and stuff like that. So it just it's interesting how that comes about. And from your point of view, do you think that now, because people don't need domestic radio to kind of get their music out there, do you think it's going to change people's perspectives on music? Eventually people are going to stop going to domestic radio or whatever's popular? And because I think the cool thing now is that you can go to a show and a band can sell out a place, and you might bring a friend who's never even heard of them, and it's because they have like all this following online, So do you think that's going to be like a changing factor to how the music industry works? And
yeah, it's difficult to sort of predict it, really. I think people still need or still want some sort of hub, whether it's a Facebook group or something where everyone sort of presents to their friends what music they would suggest they check out and stuff. Obviously, this can happen in real life as well, but like online, I feel people, they want a one-click stop of where they can go and check out music that either their friends will think they like, or there's a good chance that they'll like it. And obviously all sorts of places online now are doing the thing where they present to you music that they think, oh, you bought this, so you're going to be interested in this. But often that's that's really wrong. I find just from when we were putting up Enter Shikari tracks on various websites, and then when we refresh the page and we see what it suggests, and it's like, oh really? it can be very weird, but that's we're still not quite there yet. But yeah, I think that as long as there's somewhere where everyone can just converge, because people want to know what their friends are listening to, they want to know what the latest vogues are and stuff, and it's very easy. Like for instance, whilst we were recording our new album, we've just finished recording it, so I haven't actually been listening to any music for 4 months, because I've just been in the studio, just absorbed in this project. And I go to my iTunes and I'm just like, oh, like there's nothing new in there for ages. And so it's very easy just to get into a rut of just listening to the same stuff. And I think you do have to give it a bit of time and put a bit of effort in. And there's so many amazing artists and bands out there so it's going to take a bit of effort. And I guess people have to realize that. And obviously the best way to discover a new act is live. I mean, nothing beats that, when you just either at a festival or perhaps you go to a gig and you didn't know the supports and you get there just in time for one of them and they blow you away. I mean, nothing can beat that. But certainly just word of mouth and the recommendations from your friends can be a good second best.
Yeah, that's how I heard of you guys, because my brother actually, sometimes what we would do if we see a band that we like on tour and they're touring with a band we've never heard of, we'll check them out to see like, oh, maybe they might be cool. And then you guys were on tour with Prodigy, and then my brother checked you guys out, and then he's like, yo, these guys are fucking awesome. You got to check them out. And then, it was just, I think, I don't know if you played a show with Prodigy or something. He was checking out. Did you play with Prodigy? Am I making up this story?
Yeah, okay. we did, a big show in the UK. It was like sort of their own festival. And then we were lucky enough to actually be main support to their arena tour, like around mainland Europe, which was just the dream come true. It was incredible. Yeah,
that's awesome. How was that show? Because I mean, obviously they're more like electronic and stuff like that. Did people, were people acceptable to a type of music that was a little heavier than what they were doing?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, obviously we picked the set with like the sort of more of our dance orientated tunes, but it seemed to go down really well, and we got a load of new fans out of it. But I think because Prodigy, even though their music is electronic, and live they do have guitars, they do have drums, but it is it's electronic. You can't really weave out of that, but it does have the punk mindset and quite an overt punk just look, I suppose, and just feel about it, vibe about it. And I think those two things give us a strong link to them, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. So were they one of your influences? Because you do have, or you, let's get, actually that's what I want to ask, and I got my off track like usual, but what was your influences for your lyrics, and have they changed as you got older? Because throughout the years, I think that as we become more politically aware, or we become more aware of just, I guess, our social atmosphere and stuff like that, I feel like we definitely are more mature. I look at myself like 5 years ago, and I thought like I was super smart, and I'm like, dude, I was a fucking dumbass. I didn't have anything figured out, and even today I kind of feel like that, but I feel like I've had some progress. But have you seen, as you matured, like your music become, has it drifted, or your lyrics, I mean, have they drifted anywhere? Have they become more social, or have you strayed away from it? Are you even more angry than you've ever been about stuff that's going on, as you've learned about the social atmosphere and then kind of what's going on?
I think, I mean, certainly this album that we just finished, it does have some of the most angry moments we've had. So there's still a certain extent of vehement, very candid anger on there. But yeah, I guess as I say, like the local scene was a big influence, and so throughout Enter Shikari's existence, I've always felt that sense of responsibility just to talk about global issues. Like I was always put off by, I mean, obviously when someone's singing about, say, a relationship or a personal issue, a big percentage of the audience may have experienced something very similar and can therefore connect to the music, which is great, but it's very easy to slip into cliches when you're speaking about things like that. And it is when you're speaking about social issues and political issues as well. But I think I just wanted to make sure our band was always felt global. Like the things that we're talking about, the big issues of our time that involve everyone, whether you like it or not, no matter what country you're from, who you are, what age you are, what sex you are, what race you are. It was just something that we wanted to feel like our music was just had its place on the global scale. And I think that was probably the only sort of conscious sort of political effort into deciding what we were going to talk about. That was it, really, that we just wanted to transcend the boundaries of countries. And that's the only thing we thought before that first album. And the first album talked about concepts like fair trade and sweatshop labour and things like that. And there was the first nod to climate change in the song Mothership, and Johnny Sniper. But on the whole, it was quite metaphorical. It's quite shrouded. There was nothing too frank. And as we've gone along, we've got more and more frank in the things we speak about, and perhaps more and more angry as well. So and that we're still going in that direction. But the new album, I think it's definitely more diverse. There's been a little bit of a conscious effort to just really work on the getting back to the poetic nature and how the music and the lyrics, the interplay of the emotions, the music representing the lyrics. There was a lot more thought about that as well.
Yeah, I love the lyrics. If you stand for nothing, you will fall for anything. Like those, you have some, and you're right. Like the first album, I definitely didn't. It didn't hit me that you guys were so like the issues, because sometimes things are just metaphors. You can misinterpret them, and as like time went by, you could definitely tell that it seemed like you're putting it out in a way that people can kind of digest a little easier. But I think either way, it works. I think that you don't want to make a conscious decision of just coming out and saying things in a blunt way, because then you could probably make some boring lyrics too. So I guess, is that something that actually you think about? Like, do you ever like, well, I want to kind of have this meaning, but yet I don't want to make it a metaphor where nobody will understand it, because then there's no point in having a meaning. Is that ever like a battle you have with yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was only talking about this the other day, actually. There's a balance, it's a constant balancing act, because I loved, say, for instance, Rage Against the Machine is another example, but also one of my favourite bands, At the Drive-In, that their lyrics are incredibly complex. The guy sounds like he just got a thesaurus and just kept going like that, and just, I'm going to use that word here and that word here, but it's incredible. Phonetically, the words sound incredible. So that's something I find very important. I often read the lyrics back and sort of ask myself, do these sound good sort of outside of the music? Could this be a spoken word piece? Do the phonetics, the sounds of the letters and the consonants and the vowels, does it sound interesting? And is there a dynamic in that itself? So that's something I think about. So, therefore, I'm not going to be making lyrics that I love you, she is so pretty, stuff like that. I like at least a bit of interesting rhythms and things. But yeah, it is tough, like, because I loved being able to not tell immediately what a song was about and having to really look into it and sort of decode lyrics. And that's, again, something that I had to do with it without the drive-in. And I think there's a certain sort of feeling of just, you feel closer to the band, I think, when you've had to put some effort in to see what the lyrics are all about, and then when you get there and you have that eureka moment and it all sort of falls together, or you listen to an interview and it's like, oh, so that means that, and I feel like you're then more invested in it rather than just having it, served to you on a plate. This is a song about breaking up, or this is a song about wanting you to get on the dance floor, various wank that we hear. So yeah, but then of course there is a balance, because you don't want it to be too shrouded. You don't want it to be just like, what is he on about? Like, which I'm sure there are going to be some points in our music where it is like that.
Yeah, that obviously you don't need any advice from me, but when I used to write, it was one of the processes I used to do was when I used to play music, and I still do like a solo project called Theory 6, and I do electronic and metal music, similar to you guys, just not as good. But but when I used to write, it's funny you mentioned that, because that was one of those things I was always very conscious of, because I grew up loving poetry, and I always thought about music, and I'm like, dude, this lyric's really good, but only because there's a melody and a catchy beat on it. If you took the lyrics alone, like when I used to get an album and read the lyrics and they didn't move me, I'm like, those are shitty lyrics. It was just the fact that it was on a beat and melody, and that's what made them enjoyable. So you realize it wasn't the lyrics and the meaning and the metaphors that were moving you. It was a combination of everything. So like I had like this conscious decision that I'm like, I wanted to write the lyrics first, and I wanted to be able to read the lyrics on their own. And if that moved me or made me feel like the same way like a sad poem will in some way emotionally affect you, if I had some feeling reading this, or there's some flow or something that I liked and it was just as enjoyable as just lyrics, then to me, then it was ready, and I put it on music, because it was just something that I tried to do. But I was always afraid of that idea of, well, what if it just sounds really good on, like, what if the lyrics suck and they just sound really good with this beat, and like you said, get on the dance floor. Like, there's a lot of parts that say that. Obviously that's not a good lyric, that's not a good line. It's like, if you just read that in a book, you'd be like, what is this? Like, this is awful. So it is kind of weird how that works. But and also, like, your lyrics, you're talking about the global idea, and like fuck boundaries and fuck flags and stuff. And I remember the first time I heard that was like, even though it seems, I mean, pretty upfront with what you're meaning, like, you really had to think about it a little bit and be like, well, what did he mean by it? What's influencing that feeling of that? And to think about nationalism and like all the not good it's done, like you said, like, it separates us. Like I've used this idea before on this podcast. Just like, if somebody get hit by a car, we never think like, oh, what's their political view, or what's their skin color, or what's their religious view, before we go and help them. It's like, we're humans, and we look at everybody as a human, and we help them up. And then it's like, but then that same person, you can go have a drink because you just helped them up, and then you'll be arguing about political views. It's like, so it's like all these things where like I feel like all these things separate us. And like you said, like, we should look at things as a global perspective, and like, we're all on this floating fucking planet that we have nowhere else to go, and we can't just rape it of its resources and then hope that we'll figure it out later. And it's like, we do have to look at the big picture. And I think that's a huge issue with like with people in general. I think we're so caught up. Like, I work a full-time job, and it's the same thing. Like, I struggle sometimes to keep up with what's going on, or good information with disinformation, and trying to like research stuff and trying to stay updated on what's going on. And it's just like, so it's like, I feel like our lifestyles have become, because of our lifestyles, it's become easier to keep us confused or dumb or selling us bullshit, and I think that it's a sad thing. Like, we do need to look at the big picture and get this information out. That's why when there's bands that do talk about stuff like you guys talk about, you can get some kids that are younger to maybe pay attention to I guess issues before they're really old enough to know how big they are or how important they are. And then maybe then you create a little this ball of potential who's gonna be an activist one day, or do a documentary or whatever. So because like, all these things influence us, from music to movies to whatever, and it's all the whole nature versus nurture debate. But I think a lot of it, most of it is nature, and it's or nurture, I should say, and what we see and what we hear and stuff like that. And we're working in near UMass in Amherst, and it's funny because I was driving through the campus, and I'm seeing all these kids with backpacks with their headphones on, and like, they're just walking, and I'm just thinking like, what is he listening to? Like, what is he listening to? I wonder if he's listening to something that might change his perspective or change his opinion, the same way maybe music or a podcast did to you or me. And you just see all these kids, and they're just like these little balls of potential that you're just like, you hope that they go, they get the right information and they get influence in the right way to make a difference. Because really, like you said, like, we do have to look at things in the bigger picture, in the global picture. And this leads to another thing I was curious about, the Zeitgeist movement. How did you get involved in that? How was it one of the films that you kind of just ran into, and then you end up becoming a fan, or or how did that go about?
I remember being recommended the first film, like by a few different mates, and it took me a while to watch it. But when I did, it was, I can remember it well. Like I couldn't sleep that night. I did the foolish thing of watching it at like, 10 o'clock or something, and then going to bed afterwards. And I was just like, I can remember laying there for hours just. And I think I actually ended up getting up at about 3 and just ended up researching stuff that I'd seen, because I was like, it just blew my world wide open. Like, as I mentioned, that I'd been introduced to various sort of areas of politics and society throughout our local scene, and obviously in various other places in my life. But this was such a distinct just epiphany, really, that it kind of just changed everything. And then it just became interested in it from the second movie, wasn't it, when they actually started the movement. And just being in touch with it ever since. I find it just now that the movement's really kicked off, and if anything, it's like overtaken the sort of the legacy of the films. I just find it as a great resource for knowledge and different perspectives, and it just makes you think about things a different way. It's just really helpful, really, as a resource.
Yeah, it had the same effect that Loose Change had when I first saw that. I don't know if you're familiar with the 9/11 movie Loose Change, but it was same idea. Like when I saw that movie, that documentary on 9/11, it was kind of, I felt like, David Icke just showed me a real reptilian. Like, I feel like, I'm like, my whole life just fucking turned upside down. I'm like, holy shit, like everything I thought I knew, I don't know. And it's just, it is at first a little scary. And then I think afterwards, I think it is scary because you realize how many people, it's like one of those things. I forget who said the quote, but it's like it's easier to trick somebody than convince them they've been tricked. And I feel like a lot of people have been tricked, and then we're trying to convince them they've been tricked, and they don't want to listen. And it's one of those things where I feel like those documentaries, and it's amazing because Peter Joseph did do it as like a musical thing, and it just blew up into a documentary. And like you said, the movements become even bigger than the films themselves. But it's one of those things where it did, and it exposes the banking scam. It exposes capitalism. This whole idea that you need capitalism for progress because people are motivated by money. I think that's bullshit. I mean, people aren't motivated by money. Some of the greatest thinkers and artists are motivated by their work. They're motivated. I'm sure if you're making money doing what you love, obviously that's a plus. That's a great thing. But you're obviously not motivated by only money. You started doing it probably, doing crappy clubs, getting paid very little, and like most bands, and now, you're lucky enough where you are doing it for money, but that wasn't your motivation. That wasn't what, and if it is your motivation, you're probably going to, chances are the artist is going to suck because they have the wrong motivations, So I just think this whole idea that capitalism is how we progress and what motivates people is bullshit. And there's a great book called I've quoted a few times on this podcast, but I always forget the full title. It's Drive, the Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us by Daniel Pink, and it's it's same idea. It really gets into the idea of what motivates people. I think it kind of it will change your perspective on capitalism, and never mind that capitalism means that profits trump morals always, and that's insanity to me. Like the fact that, I mean, I drive a GM, but I was fucking furious when GM made a business decision of not recalling some ignitions, and 14 people are dead because of it, because some CEO decided, hey, we can't afford this recall, so that ignition, which was shit and end up whatever it ended up causing, or how it caused, I don't know, but it caused these car accidents. It to me, that's insane. That people's lives are not as important as making quarterly gains, and you see that with the oil business, the reason why science isn't as advanced as it could have been. You look at it all the way back to Nikola Tesla and Edison. I mean, Edison was obviously motivated by money. Tesla was motivated by his work. And I think most people will agree that Tesla was a greater mind and had a bigger perspective on things. And so is that something that really intrigues you, science and the opportunity of using science to I said this with Douglas Ruskoff when he was on the show. Like, I feel like throughout civilization, we were on the right track. We created the wheel and fire and houses, and we always made life easier. And at and then as life got easier and we had more free time, we cared more about thinking and arts and stuff like that. And at some point, capitalism fucked everything, and now we care more about money. But it's like, what's your point of being here? Like, I feel like we have to look at things in a perspective, and not to go on this fucking 10-hour rant, but it's one of these things that really move me. I think it's important for people to really look at their lives and think about, like, you can always make more money, you can't make more time. Every weekend you spend trying to get promoted or trying to get more overtime is one less weekend that you have with your friends, with your family, and doing these things that truly bring you happiness, that have no connection to money. So I just think that that's an important point to kind of get out there and for people to kind of pay attention to, because my parents are old school Portuguese, and they are always like, I tell them, enjoy your fucking money. You worked hard for it. You lived your whole life. You worked your whole life for it. Like, enjoy it. And they're like, oh, the more I spend, the less there is for you, when I pass away. And I'm like, I don't care. It's not about me. Like, enjoy your life. Like, this idea that we've been molded to believe that just having a crappy job and working 40 hours a week is acceptable. And then when we retire at 65 or 70, cross our fingers. Hopefully we're healthy enough to play some golf and before we croak. It's like, to me, it's infuriating, because people do have way more potential. And again, I'm sure there was a question in there somewhere.
No, I couldn't agree more with everything you said. Like, capitalism is a stultifying concept. And the really sad thing is that people are born into the world, and because they're young and sort of feeble, and everywhere you look, you feel sort of inexperienced, and like, life is frightening and unnerving, and you don't know what's around the corner, and you just presume that this way that we've structured our world, this the free market, capitalism, whatever you want to call it, we just presume that because it's bigger and mightier and older than us, that's just a normality. That's something that is just there. It's a rock. It's part of humanity. It's part of the world, just like a mountain is. But it isn't. It's just this structure that just so happens to be employed for the last few hundred years. And yeah, with the Zeitgeist, like the first films, like, to a certain extent, the bits about 9/11 and the bits about religion, I had inklings about both, but the religion bit really interested me, but I sort of knew about it, and the 9/11 bit just got to the point where it's just like, whatever, like, I don't know, it doesn't really interest me anymore. But the whole stuff about the economy, I had no idea. I was clueless. I knew there was some sort of it was the system was unfair. I had an inkling about that, and that was it. And so the Zeitgeist movement and the films taught me that no matter how much you're going to regulate or not regulate the free market economy, it doesn't matter, because the capitalism contains structural flaws, and they're always going to bring us to environmental abuse, and they're going to destabilize the world, basically. And yeah, just getting into that and being introduced to those concepts was really interesting. And then what was the other point? Yeah, the Dan Pink book, Drive, is incredible. I only actually got sort of 2/3 the way through it, because I found there was a lot of repetition, and he went off on sort of caveats and stuff. But the stuff about the different levels of motivation, so like the most base sort of primal motivation, like I think he calls it biological motivation, so to eat, to drink, to find shelter, to have sex, to reproduce, to make yourself live on, your genes live on, and then there's extrinsic motivation, which was like any external forces, so things like punishments and rewards, for instance, which is obviously what the whole of capitalism is about. And then what capitalism doesn't take into account is the intrinsic motivation, which is I think what he calls like the joy of the task. So for instance, making music is it should be, at least, if we're outside capitalism, it would all be purely intrinsic motivation, and such strong intrinsic motivation that we would actually, we could be fooled to think it was biological, like we need to create. And that's just something that isn't, capitalism completely, it just doesn't let it blossom inside us, the creativity. You have to be of a certain wealth, you have to have a certain income to even be able to think about music. Music, and throughout most of human history, music and dance has been one thing, and it's been this communal sort of driving force for the different communities and tribes and cultures and ethnicities. And every culture, every tribe, everyone on this earth has had language and has had music. The oldest instrument, I think, dates to about 50,000 years old, which is like a little flute made out of bone. So these are such important, like, unifying concepts that have brought us together, and have been an intrinsic and integral part of like everyone's lives, like throughout the history of our species, back to the Paleolithic times. So to be living in a system where it's not encouraged, and it's not normality that we're just all creative, is very saddening. And obviously lots of people will then jump in straight away and argue about how capitalism is motivational, with its profit motive. But then again, in that book, Dan Pink lays out all the research, tremendous amount of scientific research that's been shown to, it presents all the terrible sort of byproducts of that style of motivation, and how it actually isn't as good as intrinsic, the motivation, the joy of the task, the wanting to give to humanity. And like you say, that's what Tesla had in mind when he was creating his wireless free energy for all. But yeah, capitalism doesn't support that.
Yeah, I think one thing, it doesn't support that. And I think one thing that's interesting is when people look at Tesla and the idea that, if we did focus, I mean, because basically it was capitalism that kind of, the idea of the free market and capitalism, the idea of making money is what stopped this incredible research that could have been, who knows, we all could have free energy right now. And have you ever heard of like those, those net energy houses, the houses that kind of heat and cool themselves and stuff like that? You can just basically, I guess they don't work 100%, that you still need a little help from like other resources, but it's a house that's this one design that actually will heat and cool itself, and without having to use any, it's just solar panels and stuff like that completely. Right. You don't need, and it's pretty fucking amazing. But these things, it's like something that I've never heard of until recently. And it's just like, I really do feel like if our focus was on how can we keep progressing, like I said before, like at one time we kept trying to make things easier, and that now it just seems like we have less free time, and we have less money, and income equality just keeps growing. And the other thing that was really important that you said is this idea that the way society is today is the only way that will work, or it is this way because it has to be this way. And just like any route we take, we could have easily took another route. We could have decided that we don't have to use money. We could use, some other thing. We could pay, so just like this idea that like you said, the way things are today is the only way things can be. That's like I think that's what stops people from trying to understand like the Venus Project or the Zeitgeist movement and these type of ideas that we don't have to own things to be happy. We don't have to, it's like people just seem like it's like, well, no, I earned this and it's mine and I don't want to share with other people and whatnot. But I do think that the way things are today, we're locked in this way that it's like we think that it's just like when there's a president. I remember when Ron Paul ran, one of the most common arguments is that he's too radical. His views are too different. It's like we keep convincing ourselves that anything out of the norm is too different, and it's just like, well, isn't that what we need? Is too different, because apparently what we have now doesn't work, so I just think we, like you said, we I can't word it, and I can't put it, I can't seem to explain it, but this idea that things, that the way the economy works, the way we live our lives, the 40-hour work week, like this is the way it has to be. I just think it's insanity. And do you think that so obviously you're a fan of the Zeitgeist movement and all that stuff, but do you truly think that something like this, the Venus Project or the Zeitgeist movement, this idea of having science basically relieve us of mindless things, and we could just that could be the future? Do you think that's a real possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that the scientific method is the stamp of human ingenuity. It's the one thing more than anything that has given us more progression as a species, and it's one thing we can to some extent rely on as well, and we can trust. At least that there isn't anything better that we've come up with yet. The scientific method. I mean, and then, it was sort of the first concepts of a method like that were brought up by one of my heroes, Socrates. The main bad man, the first of the philosophers, of the Western philosophers, and that sort of Socratic method that then was sort of developed by Aristotle, and all these amazing people in history have brought it about. And it's such a simple concept, just of experimentation and making a hypothesis and testing it and updating your knowledge upon the results. It's I think to a certain extent it's all we have, and if we can base our society with that at the forefront, so without money in politics, without greed, and just have a society where that's put in place. Because another great sort of leap forward that's happening, well, it's been happening. It started through many philosophers throughout history, but it's certainly having, if not a revival, but being pushed forward, is the concept that the science is now, we're realizing that it can actually have something to say about morality. And Sam Harris says he's got some great books and lectures all about this. And that's kind of the area where religion was sort of clinging onto, ethics and morality. We get that from religion, right? Even if you're not religious, they're all religious concepts. The golden rule. Well, no, it's not. It's actually the golden rule, for instance, was put forward by Confucius and Socrates again, way before any of the modern religions. So it's I think just a trust in science and in humanism and environmentalism. This is a cliche now. I think people know this, but it's just so hard to get past that swinging pendulum from left to right of conservatives to, at the moment, Labour, which I guess is Democrats for you guys. They're just trying to sort of spruce up some energy ready for the elections next year to try and beat the Conservatives, so the Republicans. And it's just, again, the pendulum sways back and forth, and they're both just versions of each other. There's such this sort of spectrum of differences between the two parties is just laughable, especially when you watch a few TED Talks about environmental architecture or city planning or just anything about sort of where technology is at, and then compare that with sort of what we're talking about and what our society is and how they're structured, and it's just ludicrous. I think technology and science and to a certain extent sort of modern philosophy need to be put towards the forefront of society, and until that happens, money and greed and the pendulum swinging back and forth is all we're going to be left with.
Well, I think we do have some positive things going on, because I mean, we just had the biggest climate change march in New York recently, which was badass.
Fucking huge one, wasn't it?
Yeah,
was it 300,000?
Yeah, it was
400,000 or something like that.
Fucking crazy. Yeah, which is awesome, because to think that that many people realize how important it is And it, it's like reminding me of like the 60s again, reminding me. I wasn't fucking alive in the 60s, but I mean reading but just like seeing video of the 60s and hearing about like all these protesters and all, like it's to me that's inspirational, because it's like these people didn't have social media, and they had to do way more work to gather people together. They had to knock on doors and call people and give cards and letters and stuff like that, and put posters up. So it's I think the internet is this amazing tool. We can share ideas, and we don't have to. I mean, I think our generation is changing anyways, because I was talking to somebody recently about much older than us, and they have kids that are getting out of college, and they're saying how their kids, instead of like the questions they're asking their employers that they're putting applications and going to interviews for, aren't questions like, oh, how much money am I going to make? But it's how much time am I going to have off? Am I going to get vacation? Am I going to have to work overtime? Like it almost seems like this stranglehold that we had, where like our whole point of living and breathing was to make money for this corporate monster. And then once we died, that was it. That corporate monster just kept going, and we lived our whole lives for this thing. And it just, I think that we're becoming more aware that there's more to life, and I think that's a positive thing. And when you see these marches for climate change, it's awesome, because for the fucking longest time we had people who still denied it and still said, oh, it's not, it's like, even though all the major scientists and any ones that were denying it were had their hands in somebody else's pocket. I think it's like Merchants of Deceit or Merchants of Doubt or something. It's a great book about the link between these scientists and like big tobacco, and there are a lot of them were the same scientists and stuff like that. And so it's amazing. But isn't that like something that's kind of scary, the idea that like people can easily, like, people watch Fox News. If I go to somebody's house and I see Fox News on, I get immediately scared. I'm like,
slap them. Just outright go up and slap them.
My gym has Fox News on. I was at the gym the other day.
Mate, you should complain.
I should. You're right. and I've complained to other people who go to my gym, but you're right. I should complain. So I'm like doing some exercise, and I'm looking up, and they're talking about like the war on poverty. They're like, 50% of poor people have TVs, like 70% of poor people have new sneakers. And I'm just like, wait. So like you're complaining that like the only way we can feel bad for them if they're completely homeless, like just because you have shoes and a TV, like you don't know what type of condition that TV is or whatever. It doesn't mean they can't enjoy themselves. Like, oh, the only way we can feel bad for you if your life is completely miserable. Oh, it's not that bad, even though you can barely make ends meet, and and you have to eat shit food because you can't afford anything organic. Like, but you have a TV, so like obviously it's like the fact that this was on, and I couldn't hear it because like they don't have the volume on, but I could just see the little things, and I'm just like, this is fucking propaganda at its best. I'm like, this is
the worst, man.
Yeah, I mean, it drives me crazy. And when I talk to people and they say that, it's like, it's not even like news, it's opinion. It's a bunch of people just like giving opinions. And the thing is, when they blur that line, that's when you can trick people, because they don't know the difference between basically, I had a guy who argued with me that the Ferguson thing, he's like, oh, the cop got punched in the face. There's I saw it on Fox News, and I'm like, listen, I don't know if the cop got punched in the face, but if you saw it on Fox News, I'm assuming he didn't get punched in the face. But people really see it as news. But I think that, we talked about Robbie Martin, who I just had on my show recently, Abby's brother, and shows like Abby's Breaking the Set, and all these other, James Corbett, who I've had on the show, all these people who are a great alternative source. You can watch TV on YouTube. You don't have to fucking, watch mainstream media anymore. And I think that's a positive note. And this march is a positive note. The fact that, I don't know how it was in the UK, but they're selling us on the Syrian war for like a month of propaganda of like, oh, they use chemical weapons, So it's just, did I lose you?
Oh,
hello? Oh, you're still there. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that was just
froze for ages, so I'm not sure what you said in the last 10 seconds.
Oh, that was the NSA cutting in.
yeah.
But it's just I think the whole thing. What issue is there? One issue that really like boils your blood more than others? Is there one thing that like you're really passionate about?
I mean, climate change denial's up there. It's definitely. I mean, the weird thing about like Fox News, for instance, is over here I would put money on like maybe 80% of people. If you say Fox News, they just it's a joke. Like we I guess that maybe the person must be on the liberal side of things, but even like people who are sort of apolitical, they know that Fox News is a joke. Like, it's just like this crazy right wing, and like you say, everyone on it, that it's not news. Like, news, it's more like fiction, or as you say, just opinion. Hippocrates said that science is the father of knowledge, but opinion breeds ignorance, and that's what they're doing. Fox News are just feeding ignorance into the world, and it's so unfortunate that there's such a huge station, like, you know, for instance, to be played at a gym. You know, I guess they still are one of the big boys in terms of news. So yeah, it's so sad. And Russell Brand does. Have you seen his Trues?
Yeah, I love Russell Brand.
Things on YouTube. Yeah, so he does some great stuff against Fox News, and he's obviously really funny as well. But yeah, I think, like, I've done a lot of sort of research into climate change. You know, it's been one of the main sort of returning lyrical concepts throughout Enter Shikari's life, really. And like you say, Merchants of Doubt is an amazing book, and one I've just finished as well, which is, I think it's just called Climate Change Denial, Heads in the Sand or something like that. Which just, again, it's almost like a notebook or a how-to to sort of defend climate science, and it goes through everything you'll hear a climate change denier say. You know, from things about, there's cooling, the Earth's been cooling since 2007, or to the one thing that Fox News especially keeps doing is they can't get around the difference between weather and climate, and it's quite strange that, you know, a mainstream broadcasting channel just does that, just blurts out, like, you know, you get them saying things like, oh, you know, we just had like a storm, the biggest storm in ages. It's like, oh, where are you, climate change? Where are you, global warming? They'll put this sort of sassy sort of nature on it. It's just like, oh my God, for real? I mean, you know, sort of weather, climate change, and the increased CO2 in the air. Like, we just passed, a good few years ago now, but we just passed 400 parts per million of CO2 in the air. And that is something we haven't seen since, like, I think it's like 3 billion years was the last time that there were 400 parts per million in atmospheric CO2. And this, you know, that is such a landmark, and that is something that should be everywhere. But instead they're saying things like that, oh, the weather. It's just like, yeah, it's insane. Yeah, so it must be really, really frustrating when you're on the treadmill, having that shit fed into you.
Well, one thing I've learned too, is just having a lot of guests on from the UK, how similar the propaganda is in the US and in the UK. Like, you know, I had a journalist that used to work for Truth Loaders on. I had Pete McGrain, who did the movie Ethos with Woody Harrelson was the narrator in that movie. Really good documentary if anybody wants to watch it. It's called Ethos, and he's from Ireland. And same thing. Like, I talked to these guys, and it's amazing that, like, when they're selling us the Iraq war here, they're selling you guys the Iraq war there. When they're selling us, you know, going to Iran here, they're selling you, like, it's almost like it's the same country in some sense, or the same geopolitics, you know, the same people kind of pulling the strings. And it's you going from, like, the US to the UK and, like, back and forth with touring and stuff like that. What do you see as the biggest difference? Does it seem like they're basically on the same track always, and they're always kind of trying to sell you that the news is always kind of puppeting the same thing?
Yeah, there's been that sort of cliche caricature ever since Bush and Blair took us into Iraq, of just Britain being sort of the little brother at America's shorts, sort of tugging on your shorts. We're coming, we're here too. Like, we're helping you. You know, like, it's very similar. I don't think we really have. Well, we certainly don't have a TV channel that's like you know, anything like Fox News, but we have our fair share of broadsheet newspapers like that. The Daily Mail, for instance, is considered a joke by a large percentage of our population. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities. You know, we're hearing it now. There's Tony Blair has sort of come out of the woodwork and said that, yeah, we need to go back in Iraq. We need troops on the ground, obviously, as this ISIS thing is escalating. And it's just like, sorry, why would we take your word on this?
Yeah.
You're the one that led us into an illegal war, an occupation that lasted years and years and years, hundreds of thousands of people killed. And it's just like, no, you belong in a fucking cell, like drinking nothing but gruel. You smarmy, I hate him.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people in the UK, with my understanding, hates him. So I think that his legacy will be, it's a good thing that people are going to look back and see him as, one of the worst prime ministers.
He's doing everything he can to reverse that, though, and he's doing well. Like he recently won an award. I think it was the GQ Awards for like philanthropist of the year or something like that. And I mean, he does do this other work, and he's obviously really pushing that work. And forget what I did, all the killing, all the murdering, all the illegal wars, forget that. It's just, he's trying his best to rewrite history and make sure that history remembers him fondly.
Yeah, I think that's the dangerous thing about history is that you can change the perspective on it. You can change the books that teach. I mean, how many books are banned from? I was watching a Breaking a Set episode where they were talking about all these books that were banned from schools and stuff like that told the truth about the Korean War and all these other things. And it's just like you look at it, you can almost mold history the way you'd like by just giving kids a specific type of information that kind of shines a light on things in a certain way. So, I mean, luckily, I think America had two of the worst presidents back to back in history, and I think that it only makes the fact that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are so similar. I think it only makes it more obvious the fact that they're back to back and that nothing really changed. We still, they're still trying to sell us on wars, and like you said, like now with the ISIS thing, it's like we're trying to go now. I think Obama just got. I think he got approved to send arms to the moderate rebels, whatever the fuck that means. Like who's like how can you tell who's a moderate rebel? And like the fact that like we were just sending arms and weapons to like people that we don't know who they are, who are fighting for reasons we're not sure of, and how little we know about what's going on in the rest of the world in the US. Like in the US, we're very like isolated. Like it's like we think the whole world revolves around us, so it's like we're not really that intrigued with other people's news. We're just more intrigued with like news that happens in the US. And it just the fact that we have like this short-term memory where we don't remember that the reason why the Middle East is destabilized is because we went there in the first place. It's like that's why it's a fucking mess. So it's like they just every 10 years they just kind of fuck things up, and then when a new corrupt dictator comes up, then all of a sudden we say he's a new bad guy, and then we take him down and let a country. I mean, Iraq is a mess because there's three types of people trying to live there. There's many different religions and types of people, and they can't live under that type of environment with no like. I know a guy who just ran from Iraq, and I met him, and he was talking about how when Saddam was there, the positive thing was the fact that at least you were safe. Like you could, as long as you didn't talk about the government, you were fine. You could go to work and and everybody was so afraid of Saddam that people kind of didn't fuck around too much. And now it's just like it's anarchy. It's a mess, but what did we expect? It's like, so it's just the whole thing. And then just the fact that like not that long ago, Obama was trying to sell us on on chemical weapons, even though Syria's been in a civil war for years. We didn't give a shit, and all of a sudden it's like chemical weapons. We got to go in there. It's like and then I think it was a good thing. Like the U.S., I don't know what happened if they're trying to sell you the same war in the U.K., but the U.S., the people said, no, we're not going to fucking Syria. We're not going to another war. Then it's like, oh, it's a win for the U.S. Nice. We're not going to Syria. And now months later, he just gets approved to send weapons to Syria anyway. So it's just like, it's almost like we won and then we lost. It's kind of a shitty thing. But is that are they also trying to sell you the same bullshit in the UK, the whole Syrian thing? And
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, it's like the whole nation has Alzheimer's or something. They just expect us not to remember sort of what's just happened in the last few decades. And it's really sad, and we go from arming this group to then fighting this group, like in the space of just a few years. It's quite strange, but obviously it's a volatile area. It's going to be a volatile area for a lot longer, and we're not going to be helping by going in, I don't think. But then, you know, it's so when you see the horrific, I haven't watched them because I don't want to watch them, but the beheadings that ISIS are doing, you know, it's because there's that, it's not just sort of traditional, well, no, traditional is the wrong word, but it's not modern ways of warring. You know, beheading is just considered this horrible sort of
ruthless,
tactic, and so it gives an extra sense of just anger and just you want to do something, you want to combat it straight away. And if there's a way of just going in and killing those people that are doing that beheading, then yeah, do it. You know, this is scum, obviously, but that going in with drones or with troops and killing civilians, you know, I think there was an airstrike actually just, was it this morning or last night or something? I remember reading an article about it, and there's already, they killed insurgents or combatants or terrorists or whichever label they were using. But you know, they also said they killed like 10 civilians, including children. So it's just like, and you're then going to foster and create more and more enemies, and it becomes just this cycle of just violence begetting violence, war creating more wars, more generations of hatred, and it's just so petty. And again, anyone that sort of studies science of well-being and thriving and the philosophy of happiness and how we can live peacefully, you're not going to get to that world by just doing more and more of the same, by treating brutality with just another perhaps lighter form, brutality light. You know, that's what we're doing. not that dropping a bomb or shooting someone in the head is brutality light, it's still brutal. But yeah, perhaps not so brutal as hacking their head off.
Well, I think learning history is important because I think that, like you said, we do have like Alzheimer's where we forget things, and if we look back in history, we realize the same things has happened. We, you know, from Vietnam to the Korean War to, I mean, really the only real justified war was World War II, and I think it's the last war we actually, I think, officially declared war, you know. And so it's one of those things where I think when you learn history, you realize like we constantly make the same mistakes, and it makes you wonder if it's on purpose because they're not trying to fix anything. They're trying to keep things stable so they can keep feeding the military complex and just constantly make money, because unfortunately KBR and Halliburton and all these other, you know, big corporations that are making money off selling weapons and tanks and all this stuff, they're you know they need war. I mean, when war is I think it was Pete McGrain who said, you know, the umbrella maker prays for rain, you know, the military companies pray for war. You know, it's like this idea that, you know, when war is that profitable, there's going to be more of it, you know, and so I think we have to, and the thing is, like you said before, like I think deep inside most of us do have good intentions, and most of us don't hate anybody because of their religious beliefs or skin color or any of that stuff, but I mean, but how do you fix that? I mean, it's like, do you have a you know, one government, or one, you know, do you not have, you know, it's like you have to have this, it seems like we have to have this thin line between you know, a little bit of government to kind of stick up for the little guy, but then a little bit of government means that there's people running it, which means people are capable of being greedy and corrupt, and then that gets corrupt. So it's like you know, in the ideal world, I guess, well, do you still think that government is necessary, or do you think we are capable of looking at things as one day being able to, you know, as if we don't have this greedy motivation of money, maybe it would change our outlook and, you know, I guess prevent people from being as shitty as they are now?
Yeah, well, it depends. Again, you could have a smaller government, you could have a bigger government, but if you've got money, if you've got capitalism, you know, I still don't think much is going to change. It's not going to bring out the best in humanity. You know, there's good and evil in all of us. There's greed and gratitude in everybody. So you need to create a system that enhances the positives and enables us to act in those ways instead of falling into just that dog-eat-dog nature that capitalism seems to love. Like it's interesting, like what's going to happen in the next few decades. You know, the sort of the rest of our lives. I think we're going to be forced into some type or some offshoot of socialism, just through the nature of employment and the fact that technological unemployment, which obviously the Zeitgeist movement speaks a lot about, and it has flagged this as one of the big things years ago. The fact that more and more technology is taking people's jobs, and this is sort of viewed as a bad thing. You know, it's taking away people's livelihood, their ability to provide for their families, but it shouldn't be. You know, every shitty fucking repetitive job that gets taken away and replaced by technology, which, you know, can work 24 hours, it doesn't need holidays, it doesn't need insurance or anything like that. That is a good thing, and it frees a human mind. It should enable that person the time to research, to give back, to learn something that's actually beneficial. But obviously within the system, that's not the case. So I think we're going to get to a point where, I mean, technological unemployment is going to get us to the point where we're going to have like 40% unemployment on a global scale, and that will therefore sort of break capitalism. It can't take it, because obviously capitalism relies on sort of that cyclical consumer buying from corporations, and the corporations pay the people that work there so they can then buy other products. You know, it just goes round and round and round. And if there are so many people out of work, they therefore don't have the money to pay for products, which then puts the corporations in a really shit state, and the whole thing begins to break down. And that's what's going to happen. So I think the socialism aspect is that we will have to either have sort of half days. People will work maybe.
Oh, did I lose it?
Sort of distribute jobs further, so more and more people can sort of cling on to this livelihood, this way of attaining money and sort of thriving and prospering. So it's going to be weird. Obviously, there's loads of other ways that could play out as well. It could be a lot more gruesome than that. There could be a lot more violence. There could be all sorts of ways. But yeah, it's an incredibly interesting time to be alive, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think a lot of generations have said that, but I always say, I'm like, I think this time we really are, because that cycle that you talked about, I've talked about quite a few times on the show, and people are always like, do you think there's going to be, you know, some collapse, or and I'm like, there almost has to be, because this cycle can't keep going the way it's going. I mean, consumers keep losing jobs to technology because that, outsourcing stuff or putting machines where people are help the corporations to make more money, but they keep trying to make more money to the point where now consumers their employees are making less money, and there's less of their jobs, which means they're buying less shit, which means the corporation's making less money. And like you said, eventually this cycle is just going to blow up, and something has to give. And so I think that hopefully, I mean, and again, how that happens, what happens when that does happen, I think that makes sense, even though it sounded weird.
Yeah.
And I think that's all, that's up in the air. We're not sure, but something has to give. And I think that's why the Zeitgeist movement and the Venus Project, even though they don't like each other right now, they both have the same ideas. And I think it's a good thing, because we do have to look at the big picture. We do have to look at the end game and how. And I think a good thing is, like you said, unfortunately it's a bad thing because people are losing jobs to machines. But I think a good thing about our generation, we're used to getting shit for free. Like, I think this idea of needing money is slowly evaporating, because you look at it, we're talking for free. I'm recording this for free. I'm going to put it online, even though I'm paying for bandwidth and that stuff. But for the most part, it's free. Like I think we're almost, without knowing it, we're getting closer to that Zeitgeist idea of not needing money for things, and just technology gives us. I think I saw a statistic like by 2020, like some ridiculous amount of the world's going to have internet access. Like that means they're going to have something for free. They're going to be able to go online and research stuff. I mean, when we were growing up, like if we wanted to watch a music video, we had to sit there, after we heard the dial up, we had to sit there, and watch this whole thing load, and then hope that the video was good. And going online was a process where like today we instantly can do things. And so I think it's, getting things for free, it is changing people's perspectives on the world and the idea that we do need money for everything. And hopefully, like you said, hopefully it's not a bloody revolt. Maybe it is, hopefully there is a revolution of minds and awareness, and that alone, or maybe just like, you saw what happened in in New York, the flood Wall Street thing, and Occupy Wall Street. I think, some people argue, oh, did it accomplish anything? I think it did, because I think, they didn't have answers, but it's not their job to have answers. It was their job to show how angry they were at the system that's unfair. And I think they did that, like the idea that, well, they didn't have any specific issue. It's just like, well, I think they still accomplished something, so I think, and what's your opinion on activism and Occupy and all that stuff?
Well, I think it's very easy to just, sit in front of a computer and just write an article on how activism isn't doing anything, or Occupy didn't do anything. But I think there's a certain importance in that way of thinking, in that sort of progressive thirst for new ways of structuring the world, just giving that a face and letting others know that this is actually a thing. Loads of people around the world want this and require this. I think it was Plato that said, I shall assume that your silence gives consent. And I think that's just a good way to live. Like, if you don't like something, join whatever group it is that speaks out against that, or make it known, promote the causes that you believe in. If you just go through life with that either apathy or just turning away from those sort of things, just willful ignorance, then those in power they'll begin to feel that they can get away with anything. I went to the UK march, the climate march at the weekend, and it was absolutely brilliant. It's the first. We've been on tour and then doing the album for so long. I haven't been on a protest for ages, but we had one about our healthcare system the week before that I went to, which was great, and then this, which was huge. It wasn't as huge as the New York one, but it was brilliant. One of the best parts was that there was actually a truck with a massive sound system on it, and I got to play Arguing with Thermometers, a remix of it, right outside Parliament. So for anyone that doesn't know, that's like, well, I guess the name gives it away, but it's one of our main songs about climate change. So that was quite a high point. That was awesome. But just the fact that so many people, I think we had about 40,000 people walking through London. People are feeling galvanized, they're feeling powerful, and they're feeling emboldened, and more people will feel emboldened because of these marches, and then bring more people to the cause. And it's something that the government can't look past, especially as we begin to realize that a green economy would actually do better for the economy, that they might start to come round as well. So it might be money that makes them come round rather than protest and public discourse. But it's certainly not going to do any harm. I'd rather be able to be sitting down with my grandchildren on my knee going, yeah, I did that and I stood for this, rather than just, oh, I didn't bother, I couldn't be bothered, didn't think it would do anything, what's the point? It's just, I'd like to live, that's another thing. I'd like to make friends, have experiences, and you're not going to do that by just saying, what's the point?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I remember when I first started this podcast, a lot of people were like, yeah, but what are you going to talk about? And like, what, like they're basically saying like, do you really think you're going to, get a message out or do anything? And I'm just like, listen, I'm like, it's not about what I'm going to accomplish. It's like this inner fulfillment of the idea that I'm going to be able to look back at my life and say, hey, I attempted to do something. And to me, that was way more important. Even when like my band broke up back in the day, it was like, I went like a year or two where I didn't do music. I didn't do anything. And I really felt like unfulfilled life. Like, I know what people feel like working a 9-to-5 job 5 days a week and then just drinking or buying something at the end of the weekend to feel good about yourself, and then go back to that same grind. Like, that's sad that like that is many people's lives, and they, you know. And then why do you think alcohol sales are always they're always good? Because if you get hired, let's drink. I just got hired, or I just got a job, or I just got promoted. But it's like, if you get fired, fuck, I need a drink. My girlfriend left me, I got fired. So it's like, for whatever occasion, you know, getting a drink is always a good thing. But you know, it just but I think it's important to look at that and say, hey, you know, living isn't just being alive and breathing. And you know, I think that, unfortunately, only when you're closer to the finish line than you are to the starting line do you put life in perspective. Like, you meet a lot of older people, and they care more about their legacy, and they care more about being around their family and friends, and they care a lot less about how big their house is, or how beautiful their wife is, or, you know, how nice their car is. And it's just like, unfortunately, a lot of people don't get to that point until later in life, you know. So I think it's important to people to realize that, and to realize that, you know, all this activism, it is doing something. You know, I mean, the march this weekend, I mean, it got even though the news didn't talk much about it, it at least got which is not, I don't think, a coincidence that the mainstream media didn't talk much about it, but Twitter and Facebook and all these other places were talking about it. So I think it's important, and every person who went out there did do something. They were a part of that 300,000 or 400,000, and they were a part of awareness, and the fact that, holy shit, there's that many people who don't, you know, who agree that we need to do something about the climate, you know. So I think that this ripple effect, this not to use my title, but this ripple effect is important, and that we can all cause one, even if you think you're not, you know, just like you said, sparking conversation, and you know, just little things can make a difference. I mean, even your clothing line, Step Up Clothing, I think that's an awesome idea of putting, like, you know, these slogans and things on shirts that kind of get, you know, that are thought provoking. You know, it's just like, it's one other way to kind of spark a conversation and thought. So I think we can all do that. And I know I fucked up before this show because I never asked you how much time you had.
I'm good. However long you need me, I guess.
No, we can. I know it's late there. You're, you know, it's probably AM or something like that by now, but it's
approaching 10 to 1. But I'm well, obviously lucky enough to just be at home. I'm doing spending most of my days doing DIY. So luckily I don't have to get up early because I'm on my own clock. So
nice. Good. And so before I forget, let's talk about the new album. Are we expecting it later this year and or beginning next year, or?
Yes, mid-January is what we're going for. It would definitely be in January. Hopefully we're going to get a date sorted, and there'll be an announcement in a few weeks. But yeah, we literally got the mastered record back last week. Couldn't be happier with it. Yeah, and now it's this. Look, the last album, Flash Flood of Colour, we had about I think it was about a 7-month wait from when we had the, you know, completed album to when it was released. So luckily this time it's nowhere near that long, but it's still going to feel horribly long. But we'll have the first single will drop before then. So
what label is it on? Is it on your guys' label, or?
Yeah, in the UK it's Ambush Reality. UK and Europe, and we're distributed by PS. And then in America it's Hopeless Records, and then various other independents throughout the world.
And do you guys are you a part of the mixing and stuff like that, or does that? Because I always wonder, I'm like, I could just imagine like the stress that you put on yourself, like thinking like, okay, maybe change this, maybe change that, and because you know that once it's out, and that's the complete version. Does that can you over mix things and overproduce things by overthinking it?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, you definitely can. I mean, that's some people say that's why you should hand it over to the person who's going to mix it and then master it. But me being me, it feels very protective of it. So yeah, we're very much involved in every stage. We mix it. We have a few days in the studio with the dude that's mixing it, and sort of to get started, and then again at the end when he's almost there, and there'll be a lot of email consultations in between that. And then obviously when we actually leave the studio, there's sort of, you know, demo mixes, monitor mixes as they're called, which gives the guy a good sort of a direction to take the tracks on. and then mastering, which is a bit of a dark art. Not really, when people think it's mixed, it's done, but then mastering sort of molds the whole thing. It's just a cherry on top. It makes it sound wider and bigger and louder.
Is it like a lot of layering and panning and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything. So all the individual instrumentation is mixed by then, obviously after the mixing. So then it's just taking one file and just making sure the stereo, the panning is as wide as possible, and it sounds, the whole mix sounds as large and loud as possible.
What's the point of doing that? Somebody's going to listen to it in their iPhone on the speaker. I'm kidding, because
Exactly.
doesn't that shit piss you off? It's like somebody spend all this time mixing and making sure it sounds full, and then they're just playing music out of their their phone speaker. I'm like,
on the bus, with a tinny little speaker.
I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Tune.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah, and people don't realize how much work goes into it, and that's why I love anytime I bought a car, or anytime I lived somewhere, it was always my one concern is I always wanted one really nice sound system, and it was just because I wanted to enjoy the music. And when you listen to it in a real, in a good sound system, you're hearing it the way the musician wanted it to be heard, with real bass and loud and with stereo and stuff like that. So I think that is that something you worry about sometimes? It's like, I wonder because that's another thing, so you mix it on a certain speakers, but you ever I want to hear it in this type of speaker or in my car, or what, because you want to know, because you have
to, I mean, generally we try and test it out on all sorts of grades of speakers, because the music we make, it's that strange music where you want it to work in a combination of scenarios. So I want, first of all, people to be able to sit in their room with the lights off, just with headphones, and and just listen to it. And then that's really sort of approaching it as quite a piece of art, really. It's just this very personal thing that's about the listener. And obviously the quality is great because it's headphones, there's no distractions. Love people to listen to it like that, but also it's very important that it works in the live scenario. It gets people moving on the dance floor, it gets the adrenaline going. That's just as important. So you have to think about both of those scenarios when you're mixing it. We'll go out and play it in a car. For instance, Chris has got sort of a relatively new car, so he's got okay speakers, and then we've also, Rory's got a bit of a banger, so it's kind of shitty speakers. So it's good to get that crossover, those different scenarios.
But I'm sure you probably hear things in every type of speakers. You might be able to pick out something. You might if you get a sound.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it'll bring out something that you didn't notice before, and then when you go back to listening on those speakers, you'll be like, it is there, but it just perhaps accentuated it being on a different sound system.
And then when do you get to the point where you're like, holy fuck, we did this about 100 times, we have to stop, because I'm sure it's when you, because it's almost like the one thing you talked about headphones, the one thing I do love about listening to music in headphones is that you'll pick out something that you might have not picked out, maybe some keyboard that's layered in the background, or some, something that you might have not paid attention to before, because like you said, you don't have any of the distractions, and then like you said, I love just blaring music in my car, and it's more about just the feeling of loud bass and music, and that kind of get your adrenaline pumping. And even if it's loud, you might not be able to pay attention to all the intricacy, but it's so it's definitely, I always wonder that. I'm like, dude, when you put out music and and music is your life, and it's what you do for a living, once it's out, you have to live with it forever. It's so it's just the pressure of making sure it sounds exactly the way you want. And like you said, I've heard of bands also having somebody else mix it, or have different versions of it mixed and then sent to them. And then I'm like, it's kind of weird because it's your art and somebody else might not make it sound the way you want it to. So that's also an issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we produce, we co-produce. We're very much involved in every level of it because, me and Chris did music tech for, well, I guess, I don't know what you guys would call it. It's we call it sixth form or college over here, but sort of when you're sort of 17, 18, 19. And then I did music composition and technology for a year at uni as well. So we're sort of we like to think we're sort of relatively clued up on sort of the production techniques. And obviously me and Rory do a lot of electronic music production as well. So that's something that we're very involved in. And Dan Weller's been our producer for the last Well, he did Flash Flood, and he did this one as well, and he's awesome. He's just one of the lads, you know. We get on really well. He's really creative guy, and really gets us as well. He was in a band called Sixth, from literally the town next door to us. So we grew up in the same scene. We listened to the same music, and so there's a real sort of close understanding there. So that's awesome.
Nice. And then you're planning on touring, I'm sure, afterwards, right? Once the album releases, are you going to be doing a U.S. tour after? Yeah, definitely. The January will be the release date, and there'll be a headline tour in the US not so long after that. Yeah. Do you enjoy touring, or because I know the US, like you guys, anytime I look at your schedule, it's like where I live in Western Mass, like I'm about 30 minutes away from the Palladium in Worcester, and then in Hartford, the Webster, about 30 minutes away. So I'll go to both, and I'll realize you guys are at both, and then you're also here and there, and I'm like, don't these guys take a fucking day off? Like you will do like, I mean, how many days straight have you done in a row the most?
The worst for that is probably Warped Tour, where you do, I think the longest run is like, I can't remember what it is. I don't want to say it because it might be less than that, and then I'll feel like a douche. I mean, for instance, there'll be like a month with only, say, 3 days off or something like that, which, you know, you're only doing half an hour sets on Warped Tour, so it's not a headline show, so it's not like an hour and a half a night, which I don't think you could do that much. You know, you have to have, say, a day off every sort of maybe 5-6 shows most, or you're just going to do your voice in. But I mean, our schedule gets pretty hectic, but
do you enjoy being on the road and being with the guys? You guys all get along, because you're one of the few bands that actually had the same members for the whole time. Like you go to a lot of metal bands or metalcore bands, and you go to, like, you know, their Wikipedia page and it says members, and there's 1,000 past members, and it's just like, you're like, well, you know, and you guys have been, you know, the same group of guys for a while. I mean, you guys grow up together and good friends, and that help a lot, I'm guessing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're all sort of pretty relaxed chaps, you know. We have like a strong affinity. We all either went to primary school or high school, secondary school together. So yeah, we've known each other for ages, and I don't know, it just feels like if there was anyone else, it would be a different band, it'd be a different dynamic. You know, I grew up on the Beatles, so it just feels like, you know, even though Lennon and McCartney say the main songwriters, it feels like they all had their own characters. They were all intrinsic parts of the band, and I like to think that the format of a band being a band, you know, not just a front man and some other guys in the dark there at the back of the stage. Like, I really hate that. I mean, mainly because I'm actually quite a shy person, so I need the backup of the band. But I also think it's a much more interesting dynamic, and just having, you know, the individual characters all at the forefront instead of just one person.
So when you guys songwrite, does everybody have a say on the music and the lyrics and you know, the order you put things, and if you go from breakdown to, you know, dubstep part to whatever, does everybody have a say? How do you, what's the process?
It definitely changes. I mean, usually I'll at least come to them with a demo, which will usually be just electronic and with a sort of a rough guitar parts and stuff like that. So the structure will already be there, and then they'll sort of make the parts their own and develop it from there. And then usually the lyrics are the last thing to come, usually quite late, sort of disconcertingly late. But yeah, that lyrics are just me, really.
Are the lyrics out for the new album yet, or are you going to really write it the day before? I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, thankfully they're all done. But yeah, there was certainly some that went right up to the line. But
really?
Yeah, we're really happy with it.
What mindset are you when you write? Like, are you do you lock yourself in your room? Is there certain music you listen to? Is there, you know, how do you get in that mindset to, you know, or what's the process of writing?
I'm fairly, I guess, unromantic when it comes to the writing process. Like, I don't feel like I need to be in this sort of Zen state, you know, where I'm alone with my thoughts and I can pour my emotions onto the page. You know, I don't really. That doesn't really work for me. I end up just thinking about something else, or I don't know, getting distracted. But usually, I mean, it's for this album, for instance, I'll I'll have a sort of a feel for what type of lyrics or what sort of concept I want to be approaching for each song, just based on the music. So you know, the emotions that I'll feel when listening back to the music, and then I'll go and research that subject, because I mean the new album like approaches all sorts of concepts that are, I mean, things like the class system, the history of that, what biology and what science has to say about race, and how that's just been a concept that is just way overemphasized. And if anything, biology actually can tell us a lot about how it's just not even a concept. It doesn't stand up to rigorous, empirical science. It just doesn't work. So, you know, there's a lot of things that I feel, you know, I'm approaching quite daunting subjects. So I want to know that what I'm talking about is right. So once I've sort of gathered at least a little bit of knowledge on the subject and are happy with the sort of concepts, it's then that I'll try and think of sort of certain poetic possibilities, you know, ways of that I can make this to fit with the music, and to fit with more of a romanticized sort of poetic nature, I suppose.
And when do you do the writing? Is it because I know a lot of writers will, like, they'll, and like myself, I'm always writing notes in my phone and stuff like that, like something will just pop in your head. And do you do a lot of that, or do you actually do it like a sit down session? Today I'm going to take a couple hours out of the day to actually sit down and write some stuff?
Yeah, it's quite rare that I'll do it all in one day, for instance. It will be an ongoing process, where I'll just keep coming back to it. And yeah, there'll be the odd point where something comes to you in the middle of the day. It's usually music, and I have to sort of, I'm sitting on the tube and I'm like, shit, a riff comes into my head or a certain rhythm, and I'm like, I'm going to forget this. I'm totally going to forget this. And I just have to sort of reluctantly pull my phone out of my pocket and be like sitting there going, dun, 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 dun. Feeling like an absolute twat. But no, it's,
But if you forgot it, how angry would you be? If you forgot it, you would be like, yo.
We always joke about that, the sort of lost treasure chest of thoughts that, where I just haven't bothered, or, it usually happens. Interestingly, when you're going to sleep at night is when you can actually be your most creative, when your mind's in that sort of relaxed state and you're just drifting off. And you can have some incredible ideas, not just musically, I'm talking about anything. That's why meditation is so great. If you're facing some sort of problem, whether it's a personal problem, or perhaps more of a sort of an intellectual problem, meditation is amazing, because it clears the mind, obviously, and it enables your mind to link up certain sort of things that you might not have been able to link up beforehand, and enables you to approach subjects from different perspectives that you would have. So yeah, usually when I'm laying in bed at night, but the thing is, you're too tired to bother getting up and writing down the lyric or humming into the phone the riff. So the amount of things that are left into just space and never to be thought of again is quite.
Yeah, I agree. I think like the hectic day, like we're always thinking about what we got to do next or whatever, and we have all this energy, so we're running around. And I think at night there's something about your body being tired. You don't have all these distractions, and then you're just you're not thinking about like what you have to do or who's calling you or who you got to call back or whatever. And there's something about, just like you said, it is a type of meditation, and then you just kind of do your best thinking. Like I always used to appreciate music the most at night, when after a night of drinking and I'm driving home, and I'm just like, I'm a little tired because I've been out
driving.
No, well, that's not what I meant. I that did sound bad. Don't drink and drive. After I sobered up a little bit, and I'm at, but and then I'm driving home, and I'm just like, I'm tired because I've been out with my buddies all night having drinks, and I'm kind of, it's the end of the night, and you're tired, and you're driving home, your phone's not going off, and you're just put on an album, and you're listening, and it just like, it's when I paid the most attention to music, because I feel like a lot of times today, like people just kind of put it as background noise as they do their everyday things, and nobody really pays attention to it. So I always used to enjoy, like, I remember there's times where there's songs I didn't even understand the metaphors, and then all of a sudden I'm like really paying attention to it, and I'm like you said, that Eureka thing where it's just like, oh shit, I understand it now, I get it, and so I think that, and on your Z-Day thing, like the power of music, and you got into the science of it, which was super intriguing, the chemicals, how it affects your brain and all that stuff, and how did you run into that? Was it just something you're intrigued with, or was that something like, holy shit, like music does something to me, I want to know what it does?
Yeah, again, it was one of the Greek philosophers, I can't remember who said it, but just the importance of knowing your art or knowing your trade, like back to front, inside out, just understanding it. And yeah, it got to a point where I was just like, what? The main thing that got me into it was chills. When you see, some people get it, some people don't, but when you're listening to a piece of music and it will literally give you goosebumps, not just when you hear it like, this gave me goosebumps. No, it actually will. It will give you such a surge, and a sort of a warmth runs through your body. And it really is like a drug. I mean, actually biochemically it is as well, because you're triggering dopamine, which is the thing that's triggered, say, not only during it like sex or during eating, but also when you're snorting coke, that it's targeting dopamine. It's that that sort of thing. So wanting to know sort of how music does that and why it targets those parts of the brain, and just getting into that. And I guess the first thing I found out was that music actually uses almost every area of the brain that is sort of known, that's been researched and looked into and discovered, and that's incredible. So think of language, think of having to pull these words as I'm speaking. I don't know where the sentence is going to go, but I'm able to articulate whatever my next point's going to be. You think language is using a lot, but and then mathematics, possibly the most intricate concept that humans think about. But no, it's music that actually uses more of the brain than anything else. And I think that's why it totally absorbs us. We become so involved with what we're listening to, and it's because we're literally becoming it. We're just full of emotion and biochemical activity. And then learning about, so obviously you've got the dopamine, the various other sort of neurochemicals that are released. So we've got prolactin. Sorry?
Oh, the other one was oxytocin.
Yeah, oxytocin. Oh, that's the really interesting one, because that's the one that's communal. So obviously, from ENTER SHIKARI, the main concepts that we've been pushing is unity. So just learning about this was amazing, and just the fact that if you sit in a room and sing with a group of people, it's immediately going to release oxytocin, and that it's been dubbed like the bonding chemical or the love chemical, brain chemical, and it's released during, God, I can't remember what it was now. It was a while since I did this talk, but yeah, all sorts of like maternal behaviors.
I think when we're giving stuff too, like when we're, because what was it, the Paul Zak TED Talk when he talked about that experiment?
Yeah, that's a really good one to look at as well. He'll explain it well, not about music, but he explains it. I mean, just hugging someone, for instance, just feeling that closeness from hugging someone. It doesn't even have to be someone you're related to, or if you actually. You see people doing that annoying thing at festivals where they have like free hugs written on them. You're just like, oh, go away. Well, maybe you do if you're a grumpy British bastard like me. But by hugging a stranger, you are going to release that communal neurochemical that gives you that communal feeling. And that can be accessed through music as well. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, it is, and I think that goes back to like our primitive hunter-gatherers, tribal people. Like there is something about being a part of something and around people that, I mean, that's the cool thing about these marches and shows. Like the one thing you notice that people might look completely different. They might, but everybody's there, and there's this sense of togetherness, and nobody cares the way you look and all that. And I think that, like you talked about before, those things do separate us, and I think it's important to kind of look at, I guess Carl Sagan or whatever, like this, we are all one type idea, and I think we do have to look at things in that manner, even though it kind of sounds like a hippie type of point of view, a pothead type of point of view, and I don't even smoke weed, but it's funny because I didn't get to ask Ben McLeish this, but I was curious about like the Zeitgeist movement, and it is a very like outside the box way of looking at things and get out of this normal routine. And you always hear conversations. There's people I'm fans of that, like Graham Hancock, and who talk a lot about consciousness and how DMT and ayahuasca helped them kind of self-reflect and see things from a different point of view. And I always wondered how the Zeitgeist movement, I wonder if it would be beneficial if the idea of like these psychedelic drugs helping them see that, holy shit, like maybe the way things are, there's more to us than just this, and a self-reflecting type of a thing. I wonder if that'd be beneficial to people to eventually be more open-minded to a Zeitgeist movement type of philosophy of science being the future and stuff like that, and getting us out of this cycle of feeling like this is the only way the world could survive and happen. Have you ever experimented with that stuff, or is your manager going to be mad that I'm asking you this?
We've often thought about sort of the smoke machines at gigs, just dipping a little bit of little psychedelics in there, and just the smoke goes out, and everyone just starts kind of, you see the audience like breathing it in, and you're like, oh, whoa, it's the best gig ever, like look at the lights, like. But no, I haven't actually ever really done anything like that. Like I used to smoke weed a bit when I was a teenager, and that's it really. Apart from alcohol, that's my only experience of that. But I mean, obviously, there's a colossal amount of scientific research into all sorts of drugs and their benefits, and that sort of mind-opening experiences and they stay with you. A good trip does apparently like stay with you, and it does open you up to new ways of thinking and perspectives. And so that, certainly if you're comfortable with those kind of things, then go for it. I'm certainly not comfortable with my own mind, when I'm just sober, let alone when I'm doing things like that. So I don't think I would take the leap. But that's why meditation interests me so much, because you can access the same sort of bliss and feelings that you don't get in normal, when your brain state is in normal mode, basically. So I find that just as interesting, but I'll feel more in control. Whereas I've got a bit that, if you pop a pill or something, that's it. You're in for the ride. You don't have a choice. Whereas meditation, it's all down to you. You're doing it, and you can back out at any minute. But not that you're going to have a bad trip whilst you're meditating. But same sort of thing applies.
I think music can definitely be psychedelic at times. Just being at being at a show with the light. That's why I love light shows at concerts, and as much as I love festivals like the Warped Tour, and I've been to most of them the last couple of years. Just you get to see so many good bands all at the same place, and it's awesome, and you get to see a lot of bands that would never tour together all at the same place that you like. But I do think there's something about seeing them at actual indoor concert where it's all, there's no distractions. All you hear is this one band. There's no sun staring in your face. There's no, you're not hot and dehydrated. You're just there. Oh, well, you might be hot and dehydrated, but you're there and you're consumed in that experience. And there's definitely times that I've been to shows that I'm like, it didn't feel like a show. It felt like an experience, and that alone was like type of psychedelic. I mean, I remember Under Oath and some other bands that would do imagery in the background. They'd have this giant TV and they'd have all these, it looks like an old Tool video, a lot of like just dark imagery, and it just like, it felt like a psychedelic experience, so I think that there probably is natural ways. Plus, like the way you described it, like everything has a chemical reaction in your brain from what you eat to, like, people who say, oh, well, I don't want chemicals affect the way I look at things. I'm like, well, everything's affecting the way you look at things, from getting a hug to getting enough sleep, to drinking, to just everything. Everything that happens throughout the day, to your experiences, to watching Fox News, to has a chemical effect on your brain. I had Cara Santa Maria on, who is a scientist and a science a communicator, and she dealt with depression at a young age, and I did too, and we talked about the science behind it and all that stuff, and in the same way that, like, depression can be a chemical imbalance. Well, we always look at depression as a chemical thing. Well, like I said, everything affects chemicals, and I think that there is something to music and it being therapy. I mean, as you grew up, I'm sure you listened to some music that wasn't always happy, even though you probably listened to some more positive music. But I think that there is something about depressing music, that it was something that we could relate to, and it was something that helped us get through certain issues, and there's a non-chemical way, because again, when everything's for profit, and I had this conversation with her, she was on antidepressants, and it was very beneficial to her, but I'm like, I'm a little wary about antidepressants, because you look at the history of the DSM, and like the links between the people who wrote it and the chiefs and big pharma, and we're one of the countries that can actually sell pharmaceuticals on TV, which is fucking crazy. We're like one of two countries. I don't think the UK can, right? You guys can't. You don't have commercials on TV for Viagra.
I haven't had a TV for a few years. So
Really?
I don't really know. Yeah, well, I've actually just got one last week, and I'm already becoming infuriated by the adverts. I just can't stand adverts.
So where do you get your news?
Sorry?
How do you keep up with like current events? Where do you get your news?
Just online.
Really?
Just purely online. Yeah, I mean, same with obviously Netflix and things. It's not to say I don't watch films and TV series. Yeah, I do, but just not from TV, so I don't have to deal with the adverts. But then with YouTube and other stuff, you still have to deal with some of them. But we certainly don't have adverts like you guys have, especially when they'll be selling pharmaceuticals, and at the end it'll be like, product may cause, and then they just list the whole list of like anal leakage, death, all these things. You're like, what?
It is. I mean, sometimes what the side effects are way worse than what you're trying to prevent in the first place. It's fucking insanity. The fact that anybody watches that and still says, yes, I'm going to ask my doctor about this, is fucking crazy to me. I'm like, because they always say, oh, ask your doctor about this. And then they have all these side effects. I'm like, does anybody actually ask their doctor about this? It's like, it's pretty insane. And there's something wrong about the fact that you're telling people to recommend something to their doctor instead of the doctor recommending something to the people. Like that alone seems, it's like your doctor becomes your drug dealer. You tell them what you want. I need a 8-ball. It's like, there is some insanity to it. But hey, I won't keep you up anymore. I know it's late there, and I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I really appreciate all the time you took to be with us, and I know. Like I said, it was, it kind of sucked because I could only do a later show, but I appreciate you staying up, and hopefully drinking helped you keep it interesting for a bit. And thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the new album. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on tour. I'm looking forward to what the new album's going to sound like, because the cool thing about your band is you never know. I don't know what influences you guys have had throughout the last two albums, but it could be anything, so I think that's the thing that is intriguing and fun about you guys. And I hope everybody checks it out. The video episodes of all our shows, I'll have links to their websites, their Facebooks, and all that stuff, and their videos, so that way you can check out their stuff if by any chance you aren't familiar with their music. And any last message, anything you anything you want to say to the listeners, any last I guess motivational. I guess I shouldn't put you on the spot. I probably fucked that up because I just put you on the spot like you're gonna say this Socrates. You're gonna become Socrates for a second. But any last thing to the fans, or any message what's the most important message? Here we go. I'll make it a little easier, because any message that you think is the most important for my listeners, your fans, for when you're putting it out in your music. One thing that you really feel like it's important to grasp.
Well, so with our music, sorry, say cut up a little bit. I mean, okay, no, it's we've only really from day one we've only ever been about one thing, and that's unity. Just trying to surpass, just to go past these concepts that we base our lives around, you know, be it nationalities and countries which produce these really negative aspects like patriotism, and they're false divisions, really. You know, that people sort of, again, they think that countries are kind of these timeless, perennial like things, but they're not. They, you know, you only have to go onto YouTube and look in a sort of time-lapse map of Europe for the last few centuries. It's just all over the shop. Like, it's just crazy. So, you know, these are not sort of concrete structures, and they shouldn't be even there. We live on one planet, we have one chance, we're one people, and that's kind of always been our thing, really. Just building on centuries and centuries of other philosophers. I think it was Cicero said that I was born for the whole planet, not for one corner of the earth. So yeah, it just for me that seems like normality, like that we should act in accordance with nature for the betterment of our environment and the whole of humanity, not just individual groups. So I guess that's kind of our thing.
Yeah, I saw this meme about nationalism. It said nationalism, being proud of shit you didn't do and disliking people you never met. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a good way of putting it.
Einstein described it as the measles of mankind, an infantile disease. He said, "Yeah, it's beautiful."
Yeah, it is, and philosophy I think is beautiful. I think it's important to. I think the one thing I was always intrigued with philosophy is that it made you look in the mirror and see, you know, why do you truly believe things? Why do you truly act a certain way? What do you truly think? And put you in these scenarios where it really makes you second guess who you are and what you believe. And I think that's important. Even though like people now go to college and they just want to go to a university to make money, I think what you get from a philosophy class, and I never went to college. I was lucky enough that I ran into Michael Sandel, who's a Harvard philosopher, who believed in, you know, you shouldn't be exposed to good classes only because you have the money to do so. He put a whole semester online, and it was the first time I was really exposed to a philosophy course, and it blew my mind, and it was super life-changing. Just the idea of, like, you know, these scenarios he would put and just make you second guess why you believed in something, you know, from he focused a lot on capitalism and moral justice and just all these things, and so I think that sticks with you way longer, and it's super important, and like you said, like, you know, there's something about the fact that a lot of the quotes that we said throughout the show were all a really long time ago, but yet they make just as much sense as today. So even though our surroundings have changed, you know, we went from riding horses to one day riding, you know, a flying car, like, people are still people, and there is some similarities, and there's these amazing minds that these quotes still make as much sense today. So I think that it's important to kind of you know, self-reflect, and that's why I brought up the DMT thing and stuff like that, because I think that even though I've never done it, I think it is important for people, either with philosophy or a natural or with a drug like DMT or ayahuasca, to self-reflect, look in the mirror, and see what's really important, and don't let people convince you that living for to make money is your only purpose and is fulfilling enough, you know. So yeah, so I think that wraps it up. Hey, thanks, Rou. I can't thank you enough, like I said, and I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to everything. Hopefully the next time I see you, we'll be on tour somewhere in Massachusetts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. And, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks. And like I said, we talked about this before we went on the air. The beautiful thing about having these podcasts, it's not a Q&A thing. We hit, you know, people got to see you as a real person and got a good reflection of who you are. And I think the one thing that I really love about you guys is that you really seem sincere about your topics. You can tell that you truly care about the topics you hit on, and to me that's really important, and you know, I think that's awesome, and it only makes us want to support you guys even more, and makes us want to go out and even though not many people buy albums anymore, don't buy singles, buy the whole fucking album, and do that. So and buy the gear and stuff like that. And what is the best way? If you like a band like you guys, what is? I keep saying I'm going to cut this podcast, and I just keep asking questions. Hey, what is the best way of supporting a band? Is it buying an album or is it downloading it? What like if you want to support an artist and what's the best way going about it? Buying merch or?
I mean, they're all pretty important, really. At the end of the day, there'll be the record company will be taking a cut of buying an album. The merch company will be taking a cut of buying the merch. And the shows, perhaps not so much, but of course you got the whole band's crew and stuff like, and the venue hire, and so there isn't really one best way. I just prefer approaching it more from what we want to see, and I guess the main obvious thing is coming to shows. For us, it's amazing when people still buy the records, because we know that the music must mean that much to them, that they either want a physical thing or they want to show us that they're willing to buy the music because they feel it's worth it. So that's incredible, and we appreciate that to no end. But yeah, I mean, I think shows, just when there's heads at shows and you see people shouting back lyrics just as passionately as we're singing them, that nothing beats that for us. So as long as there's people still coming to shows, we'll still be scooting around the world, gallivanting around the planet, playing them. Absolutely. Yeah,
that's awesome. You never look at things like, oh, what am I going to do after music, or is that one of these things where you're so in on and you're enjoying it so much you're like, I'm not even, because I remember hearing you on London Real saying, well, I don't want to be the Rolling Stones and like tight, leather pants, to probably having to do a couple lines of coke to get up on stage, and it's amazing at their age. But there is something about like knowing your time, I guess. But I mean, with your type of music, I mean, you could still put out really interesting music, and because you guys, it seems like bands today, it seemed like they evolve with times, where like Rolling Stones still playing their old hits. Like I feel like if you keep evolving with times, it'd be completely okay to still playing when you're old, and Maiden still does it, and they kick ass. So it's I think that it could go either way, but I think it's probably one of those things where I remember 1 Minute Silence, the singer Yap, he actually got out of music because he wanted to focus on politics because he was so motivated, and then went back into music. So I wonder if sometimes you feel like, well, maybe I'll take a break from music because or what did Low Key do? Is that what he did? Like, is he an activist?
I think he went back to uni.
Really? Yeah,
university. I'm not sure what he studied, but I mean that I haven't heard anything from that camp for a while. But yeah.
Yeah, he was an awesome artist, and you want to talk about outspoken. He was not. I mean, when you have a song called "Abomination," and I think people. I love the balls he had, and the cool thing about him too is I think there was an issue with the fact that the UK and the US molded Muslims as every Muslim is a terrorist, and it just like, and I think that when you had outspoken people like Low Key, and even a band from I believe from the UK called the Heart Machine, another one that I believe they have like a Middle Eastern guitarist, and they kind of add Middle Eastern guitars in the music, which is really interesting. I think I have a friend that he's Egyptian, and he's like, when I introduce myself, as people ask what's your nationality, when he says Egyptian, people are like, oh shit, the pyramids, right? That's cool. And then when he ever says Muslim, people are like, oh, and it's just like, it's amazing how one label changes your perspective, and I think that the US have done a great job of kind of scaring us, and with that, and like you said, I think it's important to look at people as all people, so I
heard recently about a coloring book that got distributed around schools in America. I'm not sure whether it was just like a city thing. I think it was like almost statewide or something, but the coloring books, it was a coloring book about terrorism and terrorists and Islam, and it's just like, if the kids, like, I don't know, what age are you when you're using coloring books, anything from 5 to 10 or something like that, like, why on earth do they need to know about that kind of stuff? That's ridiculous to start off with, but then it just like, from that age they're going to be assuming that anyone that sort of presents themselves as a Muslim is going to be a terrorist, and that's going to be embedded in them, and that it's just an absolutely ludicrous thing to be like teaching the next generation of your nation. So yeah, that was quite ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of these radical, Christians or white, KKK members or whatever, like that's all like it was some little kid who had all the possibilities of potential in the world, and then some really shitty parents or some really shitty environment molded them into this hateful thing, But it's like I look at each one of these people and I'm just like, they're lost or confused, and they all started, I could have been them, like if I was raised by their shitty parents in the South, gun loving like America, don't take away our guns, it's like, that type of thing, then I could be them, I could be that kid. So I just think that, unfortunately, like you said, like these little things that people might not think are very important, that little thing might stick with that child forever and might mold their perspective on Muslims forever, and sometimes it's very hard to kind of, remove that from their conscious. And so that's a scary thing. I think, having kids in this, in this time is fucking scary. It's like you think about it, you're like, dude, what type of world is my kids going to live in? We hope and we cross our fingers that we're going to go down the right path and hopefully things will do well. But I mean, it's scary because you don't know. And right now it just, like you said, that cycle you talked about earlier, one day is going to collapse and are we going to be gone and our kids are going to be living through it, But it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
but until then, we're gonna do our part in trying to provoke some positive thinking and some open mindedness. So thanks again. I really appreciate it. I promise this time I'm cutting it. And and like I said, hopefully I see you guys in Massachusetts or Connecticut sometime, someplace in the East Coast. In early 2015.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Look forward to meeting you.
Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate your time. Have a good one.
Wicked. Take care.
Take care.
So.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. And ruthless conspiracy, descent to the news, stifle dissent, cover up our mistakes.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial complex. By the military industrial complex.
There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow and Exxon. Those are the nations. The world is business.